Hello everyone. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The crackling of twigs under my boots was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the forest. I had always loved solo camping trips, but something about this one felt different. The trees seemed to loom closer, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the fading light. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to too many hours alone with my thoughts. That's when I saw him. "Beautiful evening for a hike, isn't it?" The man's voice startled me, seemingly materializing out of nowhere. He was tall and lean, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. His smile was friendly, but something in his eyes made my skin prickle. "Yeah, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just looking for a good spot to set up camp for the night." "Well, you're in luck," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm a bit too forced. "I know the perfect clearing just up ahead. Why don't I show you?" Every instinct told me to politely decline and move on, but the sun was sinking fast, and I was tired. Against my better judgment, I nodded and followed him down the narrow trail. As we walked, he chatted amiably about the area, pointing out various plants and rock formations. His knowledge was impressive, and I found myself relaxing slightly. Maybe I had misjudged him. "So, what brings you out here all alone?" he asked, glancing back at me with that unsettling smile. "We just needed to clear my head," I said, keeping my answer vague. "Sometimes the city gets too loud, you know?" He nodded sagely. "Oh, I know exactly what you mean. That's why I never leave these woods. They have a way of keeping you." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. But before I could dwell on it, we emerged into a small clearing. It was perfect for camping, with a flat area for my tent and a natural fire pit ringed with stones. "This is great. Thanks," I said, shrugging off my backpack. "I appreciate the help." "Oh, it's my pleasure," he replied, making no move to leave. "In fact, why don't I help you set up camp? It'll be dark soon, and 4 hands are better than 2. I hesitated, not wanting to offend him, but also not comfortable with the idea of him staying. "That's okay. I can manage. I'm sure you have your own camp to get back to." He waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. I'm in no rush. Besides, it's not safe for someone to be out here alone. You never know what kind of creatures might be lurking in the dark." The emphasis he placed on creatures made my heart rate spike. I forced a smile and started unpacking my tent, hoping that if I got set up quickly, he'd leave. As we worked, the stranger's behavior became increasingly odd. He'd ask personal questions, then change the subject abruptly when I deflected. His eyes would dart to the woods surrounding us, as if watching for something, and more than once I caught him staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The sun had fully set by the time we finished, the clearing now bathed in silvery moonlight. I stood back, admiring my cozy setup, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped, spinning around to find the stranger mere inches from my face. "You've done well," he said, his voice low and growly. "But there's still so much to do before the night is through." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "Thanks for your help, but I think I'm good now. You should probably head back to your own camp before it gets too late." He tilted his head, reminding me unnervingly of a predator sizing up its prey. "Oh, but I'm exactly where I need to be. You see, these woods, they get hungry sometimes, and it's been so long since we've had a visitor." My blood ran cold as the implications of his words spiked. I glanced at my tent, calculating the odds of reaching my phone before he could stop me. As if reading my thoughts, he stepped between me and the tent. Now, let's not do anything rash. The night is young, and we have so much to discuss. I backed away slowly, my mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. Look, I don't want any trouble. Why don't we just go our separate ways? He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. But trouble has already found you, my dear. The moment you stepped into these woods, you became part of them, and they don't let go easily. I turned to run, but he was faster than I expected. His hand clamped around my wrist, yanking me back with surprising strength. I stumbled, falling hard onto the forest floor. "Please," I gasped, struggling to free myself from his grip. "Just let me go. I won't tell anyone about this, I swear." His eyes glittered in the moonlight, a manic glee spreading across his face. "Oh, but that's not how this works. You see, the forest chose you, and now you'll never leave." As he spoke, I became aware of movement in the surrounding woods. Shadows seemed to shift and swirl, taking on vaguely human shapes. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I had to think, had to find a way out of this nightmare. My free hand groped the ground, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed on a hefty branch, and without hesitation, I swung it with all my might. The impact caught him off guard, and his grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not caring about direction or path, just needing to put distance between us. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the underbrush, the stranger's enraged howls echoing behind me. The forest seemed to come alive around me, trees creaking and groaning as if trying to block my escape. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. Only then did I dare to slow down and take stock of my surroundings. The clearing and my campsite were long gone, replaced by dense, unfamiliar woods. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy, leaving me in near darkness. Leaning against a tree, I tried to calm my ragged breathing and racing heart. I needed to think, to come up with a plan. But the forest felt oppressive, closing in around me with malevolent intent. A twig snapped nearby, and I froze, straining my ears. I could make out the faint sound of footsteps, slowly and methodically searching the area. "I know you're out there," the stranger's voice called out, eerily calm now. "You can run all night if you like, but these woods, they always lead back to me in the end." I bit back a whimper, pressing myself against the rough bark of the tree. My mind raced through options, each one seeming more hopeless than the last. I had no idea which direction would lead me out of the forest, and my phone was still in my backpack at the campsite. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the stranger's soft, unsettling humming. I held my breath, praying he would pass by without noticing me. Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth, muffling my scream. I thrashed wildly, but whoever held me was strong. "Shh," a voice hissed in my ear. "I'm trying to help you." I froze, confusion mixing with fear. It wasn't the stranger's voice, but that of a woman. Slowly, she removed her hand from my mouth. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Someone who knows what he is," she replied softly, "and how to stop him. But we have to move quickly and quietly. Can you do that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The woman took my hand and led me deeper into the woods, moving with a surety that spoke of intimate familiarity with the terrain. We walked for what felt like hours, the woman occasionally pausing to listen or change direction. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, we emerged into another clearing. This one was different, though. Symbols were carved into the trees surrounding it, and in the center stood a large flat stone covered in strange markings. "What is this place?" I asked, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The woman's face was grim in the moonlight. The heart of the forest and the source of his power. She quickly explained how the stranger was bound to the forest, drawing strength from it to lure and trap unsuspecting hikers. But the bond worked both ways, and if we could sever it, we might have a chance to escape. As she spoke, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the trees. He had found our trail. "We're out of time," the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. "Whatever happens, don't let him touch the stone." The clearing erupted into chaos as the stranger burst through the tree line, his face contorted with rage. He lunged for the stone, but the woman intercepted him, grappling fiercely. I stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the surreal scene before me. But as the stranger began to overpower the woman, I knew I had to act. Spotting a sharp rock near my feet, I scooped it up and charged forward. With all my strength, I brought it down on the strange symbols carved into the stone. The effect was immediate and terrifying. A deafening crack split the air, and the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. The stranger let out an inhuman shriek, his body contorting as if being torn apart from the inside. "Run!" the woman shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me towards the trees. We ran blindly through the woods, the earth shaking violently beneath us. Trees groaned and toppled around us, and I was certain we would be crushed at any moment. Just when I thought we couldn't go on, we burst out of the tree line onto a paved road. A car screeched to a halt in front of us, the driver's shocked face visible through the windshield. As we climbed into the car, I looked back at the forest. A thick, unnatural mist was rising from the trees, obscuring everything from view. The last thing I saw before we drove away was a twisted, inhuman shape emerging from the mist, its agonized howl fading into the night. I never went camping alone after that night. The wilderness held a new terror for me now, one that no amount of rationalization could erase. Sometimes in my dreams, I still hear the stranger's voice calling out to me, promising that one day the forest will reclaim what it lost. And on those nights, I wake up in a cold sweat, grateful for the solid walls around me and the distance between myself and those dark, hungry woods. The streetlights flickered ominously as I pulled up to the curb, the app on my phone pinging to confirm my passenger's location. It was well past midnight, and the usually bustling streets of downtown were eerily empty. I had been driving for rideshare services for months now, but something about tonight felt off. I spotted my passenger immediately, a tall, lean man in a dark coat, his face partly obscured by the brim of a fedora. As he approached the car, I forced a smile and unlocked the doors. "Just another late-night fare," I told myself. "Nothing to worry about." "Evening," I said, as he slid into the back seat. "Heading to Oakwood Avenue?" "Right." He nodded silently, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. There was something unsettling about his gaze, a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. I pulled away from the curb, the silence in the car thick and oppressive. Usually I'd try to make small talk with passengers, but something told me to keep quiet. We'd been driving for about 5 minutes when he finally spoke. "You do this often? Drive at night?" His voice was low and gravelly, with an accent I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, a few nights a week," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "It helps pay the bills." He hummed thoughtfully. "Must meet all sorts of interesting people." I nodded, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. He was staring intently at the back of my head, and I quickly looked back at the road. "So," he said, suddenly, making me jump, "tell me about your family." My blood ran cold. I hadn't mentioned anything about my family. I don't really have much family," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's not what your profile says. In fact, it mentions a sister in Millbrook, was it?" Lovely little town. My heart was pounding now. How did he know that? My rideshare profile didn't have any personal information like that. I think you must be mistaking me for someone else, I said, my voice shaking slightly. He chuckled, a low, menacing sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Oh, I don't think so, Sarah, he said, using my name for the first time. I think I know exactly who you are. I felt panic rising in my chest. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I think there's been some kind of mistake, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Maybe we should end the ride here. Keep driving, he said, his voice suddenly hard and cold. We're not finished yet. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him reaching into his coat. My heart leapt into my throat as I imagined what he might be pulling out. In that moment, I made a split-second decision. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. The sudden stop threw him forward, and I used that moment of confusion to unbuckle my seatbelt and fling open the driver's door. I ran, my feet pounding on the pavement, not daring to look back. I could hear his shouting behind me, the car door slamming shut. The street was dark and unfamiliar houses looming on either side with no lights on. I darted between two buildings, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning. Suddenly, I stumbled, my foot catching on an uneven patch of ground. I went down hard, scraping my hands and knees on the rough pavement. Before I could get up, a hand grabbed my ankle, yanking me back. I screamed, kicking out wildly, but his grip was like iron. He flipped me over, looming over me in the darkness. In the faint moonlight, I could see his face clearly for the first time. His eyes were wild, a manic grin spreading across his features. Now, he said, mockingly gentle. That wasn't very nice, darling Sarah. We were having such a lovely conversation. I struggled against him. Grip, but he was too strong. How do you know my name? I gasped. What do you want? He tilted his head, regarding me with an almost curious expression. I know everything about you, Sarah. Your hopes, your fears, your dirty little secrets. He leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. And what I want is to play a game. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to escape. I needed to keep him talking, buy myself some time. What kind of game? I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled, a predatory grin that made my blood run cold. Oh, it's a simple game. I ask questions, and you answer truthfully. For every lie, he pulled something from his coat, a long, wicked-looking knife that glinted in the moonlight. Well, let's just say the consequences are sharp. I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the knife. And if I refuse to play? His grip on my arm tightened painfully. That's not an option, Zara. The game has already begun. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I needed to think, to find a way out of this nightmare. First question, he said, his voice taking on a sing-song quality. Why did you really start driving at night? I hesitated, my mind racing. The truth was embarrassing, but lying seemed far more dangerous. I was trying to avoid someone, an ex who wouldn't leave me alone. I thought working nights would make it harder for him to find me. He nodded, seeming pleased. Very good, Sarah. Honesty suits you. Next question. What's your biggest fear? My heart pounded as I considered my answer. The truth was too revealing, too personal. But the knife gleamed menacingly in his hand, a clear warning against deception. being helpless," I whispered, hating how vulnerable the admission made me feel. "Not being in control of my own life." He smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made me shudder. "Interesting. And right now, how in control do you feel, Sarah?" I bit back a sob, anger and fear warring inside me. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" He tissed, wagging the knife in front of my face. Now, that's not how the game works. I ask the questions, remember?" Suddenly, a bright light flooded the alley, momentarily blinding us both. The sound of an engine revving filled the air, and my attacker's head snapped up. A car had turned into the alley, its high beams illuminating the scene. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a snarl of frustration, my attacker released me, scrambling to his feet. He took one last look at me, his eyes burning with a promise of future retribution, before darting off into the shadows. The car screeched to a halt beside me, and a familiar face leaned out of the driver's window. It was another rideshare driver I knew, a kind older woman named Marge. "Sarah, my God, are you all right?" she asked, her voice thick with concern. I nodded weakly, still shaking as I pulled myself to my feet. "Marge, how did you find me?" She helped me into the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the darkness wearily. "I got a notification about a canceled ride in this area. Something felt off, so I came to check. Thank goodness I did." As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The man's last look haunted me, a clear message that our game was merely postponed, not ended. In the days that followed, I gave a statement to the police, changed my phone number, and moved to a new apartment. I stopped driving at night too afraid of who might get into my car. But even now, months later, I can't shake the fear. Every time I see a man in a dark coat or hear footsteps behind me at night, my heart races. I know he's out there somewhere, waiting for our paths to cross again, and when they do, I fear the game will begin anew, with stakes higher than I can imagine. The moment we pulled into the driveway of our new home, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. The house was beautiful, a charming Victorian with wraparound porch and gabled windows. But something about the way the neighbors' curtains twitched, the sudden silence that fell over the previously bustling street, made my stomach churn with unease. "Home sweet home," Mark announced cheerfully as he cut the engine. Our kids, Lily and Tom, bounced excitedly in the back seat, eager to explore their new territory. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. As we unloaded the car, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every few moments, I'd catch glimpses of faces and windows, quickly disappearing when I turned to look directly. It was probably just curiosity about the new neighbors, I told myself. Nothing sinister about that. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, stopping by with casseroles and welcome baskets, but there was something off about their smiles, a tightness around their eyes that spoke of hidden tension. It started with small things. I'd come home to find our trash cans meticulously organized, though I was sure I'd left them haphazardly by the curb. The garden beds, which I hadn't had time to tend, were suddenly weed-free and freshly mulched. At first, I was grateful for the help, assuming it was just neighborly kindness. But as the days went on, the attention became unsettling. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen when I noticed Mrs. Johnson from next door, standing in our backyard, peering intently through our window. When she saw me, she waved cheerily, as if this was perfectly normal behavior. I waved back weakly, my hand shaking slightly as I closed the curtains. That night, at dinner, I broached the subject with Mark. "Don't you think the neighbors are a bit over-friendly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He laughed, spearing a piece of chicken with his fork. "Honey, after living in the city for so long, you're just not used to small-town hospitality. It's nice that people care, isn't it?" I nodded, not convinced but not wanting to push the issue. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just paranoid. But as the weeks went by, the feeling of being constantly observed only intensified. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see shadows moving across our lawn, hear whispered conversations just outside our windows that would abruptly stop when I approached. The children started to notice too. Lily came home from school one day, her face pale and drawn. "Mom," she whispered, "the other kids say we shouldn't be here. They say this house is cursed." I tried to reassure her, but her words sent a chill down my spine. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions. What had happened to the previous owners? Why had they left so suddenly, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings as if they'd fled in the middle of the night? Determined to get answers, I decided to do some digging. The next day, while Mark was at work and the kids at school, I headed to the local library. The librarian, a wizened old woman with thick glasses, eyed me suspiciously as I asked about the history of our house. "Why do you want to know?" she asked, her voice quavering slightly. "Just curious," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "We're the new owners, and I thought it would be interesting to learn about its past." She stared at me for a long moment before sighing heavily. "Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you."
She led me to a back room filled with dusty archives and old newspapers. For hours, I pored over yellowed clippings and faded photographs. What I found made my blood run cold. Our house, it seemed, had a dark history. Over the past century, family after family had moved in, only to disappear mysteriously within a year. The articles were vague about the details, but there were whispers of occult activity, of sacrifices made to ensure the town's prosperity. As I read, pieces started falling into place. The over-attentive of the neighbors, their constant watching, they weren't being friendly, they were keeping tabs on us, waiting for something. I left the library in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd learned. As I walked home, I noticed the stares of the townspeople more acutely. Their smiles seemed more like grimaces, their eyes cold and calculating. I burst through the front door, ready to tell Mark everything, only to find him sitting in the living room, surrounded by neighbors. They all turned to look at me as I entered, their faces eerily blank. "Ah, there you are, honey," Mark said, his voice strangely flat. "We were just discussing the upcoming town festival. The neighbors think we should host it here." I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding. This wasn't right. None of this was right. "I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered, backing away slowly. Mrs. Johnson stood up, her movements stiff and unnatural. "Oh, but we insist," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's tradition, you see. The newest family always hosts." I looked at Mark, silently pleading for him to see the danger we were in, but his eyes were glazed over, a placid smile fixed on his face. "Where are the kids?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. They're playing at the park with the other children. Mr. Thompson from across the street said. Don't worry, they're in good hands." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I knew then that I had to get us out of there, and fast. I need to lie down," I said, faking a yawn. "Long day at the library. Why don't you all continue without me?" I hurried upstairs, my mind racing. I had to get the kids, had to convince Mark, had to get us all out of this town before it was too late. I threw some clothes and essentials into a bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. As I was about to leave the room, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that didn't belong to my husband or children. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on a heavy brass lamp on the bedside table. I unplugged it, gripping it tightly as I positioned myself behind the door. The footsteps stopped outside the room. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The door creaked open slowly. I raised the lamp, ready to strike. "Mom!" Lily's voice made me freeze. I lowered the lamp, relief flooding through me as my daughter stepped into the room. But something was off. Her movements were too stiff, her eyes unfocused. "Honey, are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to her. She smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too forced. "Everything's fine, Mom. The neighbors say it's time we need to go downstairs now." I backed away, my relief turning to horror. "Lily, sweetie, listen to me. We need to leave now." Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "But Mom, we can't leave. We're home now. Forever." I heard more footsteps, saw shadows moving in the hallway. They were coming for us. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed the bag, pushed past Lily, and ran down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. I could hear shouts behind me, footsteps giving chase. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away, away from the house, away from the town, away from the nightmare we'd unknowingly become a part of. As I reached the town limits, I risked a glance back. What I saw made my blood run cold. The entire town was behind me, moving as one, their faces blank and eyes empty. At the front were Mark and the kids, reaching out to me, calling me to come back. But I knew if I went back, I'd never leave again. With tears streaming down my face, I turned and kept running, the sound of their calls fading behind me. I don't know how long I ran or how I eventually found my way to a police station 2 towns over. They didn't believe my story, of course. How could they? It sounded insane even to my own ears. But I know what I saw. I know what we escaped from, and I know that somewhere in that picturesque little town, my family is waiting for me to come back, waiting to complete whatever dark ritual we had unknowingly become a part of. I'll find a way to save them. I have to. But for now, all I can do is warn others. Be careful where you make your home. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones hiding behind welcome baskets and friendly smiles. The old farmhouse stood silent against the backdrop of rolling hills, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the sleek photos on the Airbnb listing. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. This was supposed to be my writer's retreat, a chance to finish my novel in peace. But something about this place felt off. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to city dweller jitters, and grabbed my bags from the trunk. The key was exactly where the host said it would be, tucked under a flower pot by the front door. As I turned it in the lock, the door creaked open with an ominous groan that seemed to echo through the empty house. The interior was charming, in a rustic way of sorts, all exposed beams and antique furniture, but there was a mustiness to the air, a feeling of neglect that no amount of artfully arranged throw pillows could disguise. I ran a finger along a nearby shelf, leaving a clear trail in the thin layer of dust. "Hello?" I called out, more out of habit than expectation. The listing had promised complete privacy after all, but my voice seemed to be swallowed by the silence, as if the very walls were absorbing the sound. I spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, unpacking my clothes and setting up my laptop in the cozy study upstairs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the wooden floors, I decided to call it a day and get some rest. That's when I heard it. A soft thump, like something being set down, coming from somewhere below. I froze, my heart suddenly racing. It was probably nothing, I told myself. An old house settling, maybe, or a branch hitting the roof. But then I heard it again, and again, a rhythmic sound, almost like footsteps. I crept to the top of the stairs, straining my ears. The sound had stopped, but now there was something else, a faint scratching, like nails on wood, coming behind the walls. "Hello?" I called again, my voice shaky. "Is someone there?" Silence. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing dread. I was being ridiculous. There was no one here but me. I was letting my writer's imagination run wild. That's all. I went to bed that night with all the lights on, telling myself it was just so I could read before sleep. But every creak of the floorboards,
A house, every whisper of wind outside had me sitting bolt upright, my heart pounding. The next morning I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, feeling foolish about my night terrors. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled into my work, determined to make up for lost time. But as the day wore on, little things kept pulling me out of my writing flow. A door I could have sworn I'd left open was now closed. A book had fallen from a shelf when I wasn't looking. And always that feeling of being watched. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was very wrong. I decided to do a thorough search of the house, if only to put my mind at ease. I started in the basement, a dank, cobweb-filled space that sent shivers down my spine. As I swept my flashlight across the room, something caught my eye. A section of the wall looked off. The bricks didn't quite match the rest. Heart pounding, I approached it. Up close, I could see that the mortar was newer, not as weathered as the surrounding area. With trembling hands, I pressed against it. To my horror, it moved slightly. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What was behind that wall? And more importantly, who had sealed it up? I raced back upstairs, my thoughts a jumble of terror and curiosity. Should I call the police? The Airbnb host? But what would I say? That I had a hunch there was something sinister hidden in the basement? As night fell, I paced the living room, debating my next move. That's when I heard it again, the footsteps. But this time they weren't coming from below. They were coming from the attic. My blood ran cold. I knew I should run, should get in my car and drive as far away from this place as possible, but something held me back. I need to know, to understand what was happening in this house. With shaking hands, I grabbed a heavy candlestick from the mantel and made my way to the attic stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, announcing my presence to whatever awaited above. The attic was pitch black, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, stirred up by my presence, and by something else. There, in the far corner, something moved. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, shifting and writhing. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The shadow stilled. Then, slowly, it began to take shape. A figure, hunched and twisted, turned to face me. I caught a glimpse of pale sunken eyes, of skin stretched tight over bone. I screamed, stumbling backward. My foot caught on something, sending me crashing to the floor. The candlestick clattered away, rolling into the shadows. The figure moved towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I scrambled backwards, my hand closing around something cold and metal. The flashlight. I swung it up, the beam catching the figure full in the face. What I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't a person, not anymore. Its face was a grotesque mask of decay, skin mottled and peeling. But its eyes were alive, filled with a hunger that turned my insides to ice. "You shouldn't be here," it rasped, its voice like sandpaper on stone. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. The creature took another step forward, its joints cracking with each movement. "This is our home," it hissed. "You're not welcome here." Our home. The words echoed in my mind, and suddenly, horribly, I understood. The walled-up section in the basement, the constant feeling of being watched, this thing, whatever it was, wasn't alone.
As if in response to my realization, I heard more movement from the shadows. From behind the boxes and old furniture, more figures emerged, each as twisted and decayed as the first. I found my voice then, a scream tearing from my throat. As I scrambled to my feet, I ran, blind with terror, stumbling down the attic stairs and through the house. Behind me, I could hear them, the shuffle of feet, the rasp of labored breathing. They were following me, hunting me through the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I reached the front door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked. When had it locked? I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers clumsy with fear. They were getting closer. I could feel their cold breath on the back of my neck, hear their nails scraping against the walls. Finally, mercifully, the lock gave way. I burst out into the cool night air, not daring to look back. As I ran to my car, the engine roared to life and I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying behind me. In my rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of the farmhouse. Figures stood in every window, their pale faces watching as I fled. I drove through the night, not stopping until the sun began to rise. Only then, in the harsh light of day, did I allow myself to think about what had happened. I never went back to that farmhouse. I left a vague review on Airbnb, warning others about strange noises and unsettling atmosphere. But how could I explain the truth? Sometimes, late at night, I still hear those footsteps, still feel those eyes watching me from the shadows, and I wonder, with a chill that goes bone deep, if maybe I didn't escape after all, if maybe, somehow, I brought a piece of that house's horror home with me. Because in those moments, between sleep and waking, when the world is at its quietest, I swear I can hear that voice, rasping, hungry, and all too familiar. You're not welcome here. The first thing I noticed when the lights went out was the silence. One moment, the hum of the refrigerator and the soft whir of my laptop fan filled the air. The next, nothing, just the sound of my own breathing, suddenly loud in the darkness. I fumbled for my phone, the screen's glow momentarily blinding me. 9:47 p.m. No signal. Great. It's fine, I muttered to myself, trying to quell the unease growing in my chest. Just a power outage. Happens all the time. But as I moved through my apartment using my phone's flashlight to navigate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The darkness outside seemed thicker than usual, as if the entire world had been swallowed by an inky void. I tried the landline, but it was dead too. No dial tone, not even a crackle of static. Just silence. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching at the front door. So faint I almost missed it. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It could be anything, I told myself. A tree branch, a stray cat? But deep down I knew it wasn't. The scratching came again, louder this time, more insistent, than a thud, as if someone or something had thrown their weight against the door. My heart was pounding now, blood rushing in my ears. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the door. The thudding continued, growing more forceful with each impact. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. No signal, no way to call for help. The assault on the front door stopped abruptly. For a moment, silence reigned again. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through my living room. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a whimper. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. But the cold sweat on my skin, the trembling in my limbs, it all felt too real. The footsteps drew
closer, pausing outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, praying that whoever, whatever, was out there would move on. A soft chuckle broke the silence, sending chills down my spine. "I know you're in there," a voice called out, low and raspy. Why don't you come out and play?" I backed away from the door, my mind racing. The window. It was my only chance. I moved towards it, trying to be as quiet as possible. The doorknob rattled. Now, the voice crowed. "Don't be rude. I've come all this way to see you." My fingers fumbled with the window latch. It was old, stiff from disuse. I pushed harder, panic giving me strength. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it once, twice. The window finally gave way, sliding up with a groan that seemed deafening in the quiet apartment. Cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something rotten. I was halfway out the window when the bedroom door splintered. In the dim light from my discarded phone, I caught a glimpse of my intruder. Tall, unnaturally thin, with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. I didn't wait to see more. I scrambled out onto the fire escape, the metal grating cold against my bare feet. I could hear it moving behind me, its breathing harsh and excited. I ran down the stairs, the old structure creaking and swaying beneath me. My foot slipped on a wet step and I nearly fell. A hand grabbed at my shirt, finger-like ice grazing my back. Panic gave me wings. I flew down the remaining stairs, jumping the last few feet to the alley below. The impact jarred my bones, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I ran blindly through the dark streets, the sound of pursuit close behind. The entire city seemed deserted. Every window dark, every door closed. Where was everyone? A car. I needed to find a car. My keys were in my pocket. I always kept them there, a habit born from late nights at the office. If I could just find my car, I could escape. I turned a corner, and there it was, my beat-up old sedan, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I fumbled with the keys, acutely aware of the footsteps drawing nearer. The key slid home, and I wrenched the door open, throwing myself inside. I jammed the key into the ignition, turning it with desperate force. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. I slammed the car into drive just as a shape loomed in my rearview mirror. I floored it, tires squealing on the wet pavement. In the mirror, I saw it standing in the middle of the road, watching me flee. Even from a distance, I could see its mouth stretched in an impossible grin. I drove for hours, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every shadow on the road made me flinch. Every rustle of wind sounded like whispered threats. As the first light of dawn broke the horizon, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly. I had escaped. I was safe. But then my car radio crackled to life, startling me so badly I nearly swerved off the highway. Through the static, a familiar voice spoke, low, raspy, amused. "Did you really think you could run from me?" I screamed, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. Silence fell once more. The radio was dead, the voice gone. But as I sat there shaking and sobbing, I knew the truth. The darkness had followed me, and it always would. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it had all been a terrible nightmare. I went back to my apartment, cleaned up the broken door, and tried to resume my normal life. But things were different now. The lights never seemed quite bright enough. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. I started sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help. In the quiet hours of the night, I would hear it, soft scratching at my door, whispered promises of games yet to be played. I moved apartments, then cities, but it didn't matter wherever I went, the darkness followed. In crowded streets, I would catch glimpses of a too-tall figure with glowing eyes. In busy cafes, I would hear that raspy chuckle just behind me. Friends and family started to worry. They said I looked tired, paranoid. They suggested therapy, medication. But how could I explain? How could I make them understand the terror that stalked me day and night? Months passed. I lost my job, my relationships crumbled. I became a shell of my former self, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the moment when the lights would go out and it would come for me again. And then, one night, it happened. I was huddled in my new apartment, every light blazing, when the power cut out. In the sudden darkness, I heard that familiar chuckle. "Ready to play?" the voice asked, closer than it had ever been before. I didn't run this time. I was tired of running, tired of being afraid. Instead, I stood up, facing the darkness that had haunted me for so long. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The darkness seemed to coalesce, taking on that familiar tall, thin shape. Its eyes glowed, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Want?" it repeated, sounding almost surprised. "My dear, I don't want anything from you. I am you, the part of you that you've always tried to ignore, the darkness you've always feared." As it spoke, I felt a chill of recognition. The voice, it was mine, distorted and twisted, but undeniably mine. "No," I whispered, but even as I denied it, I knew it was true. The long nights of self-doubt, the fears I'd pushed down, the parts of myself I'd tried to hide, they had taken on a life of their own. The figure stepped closer, its form blurring at the edges, merging with the shadows around us. "Embrace me," it said, reaching out with hands that were both familiar and alien. "Stop running. Accept who you truly are." I stood there trembling as the darkness closed in around me. For a moment I considered giving in, letting it consume me. But then I remembered the fear, the helplessness I'd felt that first night, the months of terror that followed. And I made a choice. "No," I said again, this time with conviction. "You're not me. You're what I was afraid I might become, but I choose differently." I reached out, not in fear, but with determination, and flicked on the light switch. The room flooded with light, harsh and sudden. The figure before me wavered, its form dissipating like smoke in the wind. But before it vanished completely, I saw something in its glowing eyes. Not anger or frustration, but relief. As the last wisps of darkness faded away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The oppressive feeling of being watched, the constant dread, it was gone. I stood there in my brightly lit apartment, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in months. The darkness was still there, of course. It always would be. But now I understood. It wasn't something to be feared or fought. It was a part of me, to be acknowledged and accepted. From that night on, I slept with the lights off, and when I heard that familiar scratching, that raspy chuckle in the dark, I didn't run, I didn't hide. I simply said, "I see you, I accept you, but you don't control me." And in the silence that followed, I found peace.
The failing engine was the first sign that our road trip was about to take a sinister turn. As our car sputtered and coughed its way to a stop on that desolate stretch of rural Arkansas highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just become characters in one of those horror stories my sister Jenny loved to read. "Well, this is just perfect," I muttered futilely, turning the key in the ignition one last time. "Jenny,
ever the optimist, patted my arm. "Don't worry, Mike. We'll figure something out. We always do." I wished I shared her confidence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in ominous shades of red and purple. In the gathering darkness, the surrounding cornfields seemed to whisper secrets to each other, their rustling leaves a conspiratorial murmur. We had passed a farmhouse a few miles back. It was our best shot at finding help, or at least a phone to call for a tow. With no cell service and limited options, we locked up the car and started walking. The air grew colder as we trudged along the empty road, our footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Jenny huddled closer to me, her earlier optimism fading with each step. "Mike," she whispered, "do you ever get the feeling that we're being watched?" I was about to dismiss her fears when I saw it too, a flicker of movement in the cornfield to our right. I squinted into the darkness, but whatever it was had vanished. "It's probably just an animal," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "Come on, we're almost there." The farmhouse loomed ahead, a decrepit Victorian silhouette against the darkening sky. As we approached, I could see that it had seen better days. Paint peeled from the weathered siding, and several windows were boarded up. I hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. But we had come too far to turn back now. I raised my hand to knock on the door, but before my knuckles could make contact, it creaked open. An elderly couple stood in the doorway, their faces etched with deep wrinkles and wary expressions. The woman's eyes darted between Jenny and me, while the man's gaze remained fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "Can we help you?" the woman asked, her voice thin and reedy. I explained our situation, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Something about their blank stares and too wide smiles set my nerves on edge. Of course," the old man said, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant. "You poor dears must be exhausted. Come in. We have a phone you can use." Jenny shot me a relieved smile as we stepped over the threshold. The interior of the house was as dated as its exterior, with faded floral wallpaper and furniture that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades. Martha introduced herself as Martha and her husband as Jeb. They led us to a dusty parlor where an ancient rotary phone sat on a side table. "I'm afraid the phone lines have been acting up lately," Jeb said apologetically, "but you're welcome to try. In the meantime, why don't you join us for supper? It's almost ready." I opened my mouth to decline, but Jenny spoke first. "That would be lovely. Thank you." As Martha shuffled off to the kitchen, Jeb settled into a worn armchair, his roomy eyes fixed on us with an unsettling intensity. "So," he said, leaning forward slightly, "what brings you young folks to these parts?" We explained about our road trip, how we were heading to visit family in Little Rock. As we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The room felt too still, the air too thick, and Jeb's gaze never wavered even when Martha called him to help in the kitchen. Left alone, Jenny and I exchanged glances. "Maybe we should just try the phone and go," I whispered. She nodded, looking relieved. But when I picked up the receiver, there was no dial tone, just dead silence. Before I could tell Jenny, Martha called us to dinner. The dining room was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting long shadows across the walls. The table was set with mismatched china and tarnished silverware. As we took our seats, I noticed strange symbols carved into the wooden chairbacks. They looked ancient, almost runic. A shiver ran down my spine. Martha set a large oven-covered dish in the center of the table. "I hope you're hungry," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's a family recipe." When she lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. It was rich and meaty, but with an underlying odor that turned my stomach. The stew inside was dark, almost black, with unidentifiable chunks floating in the murky liquid. Jenny paled beside me. "It looks interesting," she managed, always the polite one. Martha and Jeb watched us intently as they ladled the stew into our bowls. I lifted a spoonful, trying not to gag at the smell. Just as I was about to force myself to take a bite, a loud thump from upstairs made us all freeze. Martha's hand shook, spilling stew onto the tablecloth. "Just the house settling," Jeb said quickly, but his eyes darted nervously to the ceiling. Another thump, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. Jenny grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What was that?" I demanded, rising from my chair. Jeb stood as well, his friendly demeanor evaporating. "Sit down, boy," he growled. "Eat your supper." The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs. Martha began to mutter under her breath, rocking back and forth in her chair. Suddenly, the dining room door burst open. In the doorway stood a figure that made my blood run cold. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its skin was pale and mottled, stretched tight over protruding bones, but its face was the stuff of horrors. Empty eye sockets stared at us, and its mouth was a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth. Jenny screamed. I grabbed her hand and we bolted for the door, knocking over chairs. In our haste, behind us, I could hear Jeb shouting and Martha's high-pitched wailing. We burst out of the house and into the night, running blindly down the dirt road. The cornfields on either side seemed to press in on us, the stalks reaching out like grasping fingers. I chanced to look back and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was following us, moving with an unnatural, loping gait, and behind it I could see Jeb and Martha, their faces contorted with a mixture of fear and hunger. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like lead. Finally, mercifully, we saw headlights approaching. I waved my arms frantically, and the pickup truck screeched to a halt beside us. The driver, an older man with a weathered face, took one look at our terrified expressions and threw open the passenger door. "Get in," he barked, "now." We didn't need to be told twice. As we peeled away, I looked in the side mirror. The farmhouse was receding in the distance, but I could still see figures standing in the road, watching us go. The driver, who introduced himself as Tom, listened in stunned silence as we recounted our experience. When we finished, he shook his head grimly. "You're not the first to have a run-in with the Hendersons. That farmhouse has been abandoned for years, but sometimes folks passing through say they've seen lights on, heard voices. Those who stop, well, they don't always come back." We rode in shocked silence for a while, the enormity of what we had escaped slowly sinking in. Finally, Tom spoke again. "Legend has it that the Hendersons made a deal with something evil long ago, promised it would keep them alive forever as long as they provided it with sustenance." I shuddered, remembering the strange stew, the horrible creature in the doorway. Jenny clutched my hand, her face pale in the dashboard light. Tom dropped us off at a motel in the next town, refusing any payment for the ride. As he drove away, he left us with a warning. Be careful out there. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled, and some houses should be left alone. We never did finish that road trip. The next day, we called a tow truck for our car and booked the first flight home. But the memory of that night haunts me still. Sometimes when I'm driving down a dark, lonely road, I can't help but glance in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a decrepit farmhouse materialize in the distance, its windows glowing with an inviting light. And in my nightmares, I still hear Martha's sing-song voice. Calling us to dinner. Smell that sickly sweet stew and see those empty, hungry eyes staring at me from the shadows. The security cameras blinked out one by one, each screen fading to static before going dark. I leaned closer to the monitors, my coffee forgotten in my hand as an icy chill crept up my spine. In my 3 years as a night guard at Oak Ridge Office Complex, I'd never seen anything like this. "What the hell?" I muttered, tapping frantically at the keyboard. Nothing responded. The entire system seemed to be dead. I reached for the phone to call my supervisor, but the line was dead. My cell phone showed no signal. It was as if the entire building had been cut off from the outside world. That's when I heard it, a soft thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The building was supposed to be empty. I was the only one here tasked with watching over 20 floors of darkened offices and conference rooms. The footsteps grew louder, more purposeful. They weren't coming from the lobby or the elevators, but from deeper within the building. Impossible. I had locked everything down myself at the start of my shift. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. Protocol dictated that I should investigate any unusual activity, but every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the building as fast as I could. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly weak. "This is security. Identify yourself, or I'm calling the police." Another chuckle, closer this time, then a voice, low and raspy. "Oh, I don't think you'll be calling anyone, friend." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the security office, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The hallway stretched before me, a dark tunnel, punctuated by the dim glow of emergency exit signs. As I moved down the corridor, I became acutely aware of how loud my footsteps were, how heavily I was breathing. I swept my flashlight back and forth, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The air felt different somehow, heavier, charged with a strange electricity that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I reached the elevator bank and hesitated. The smart thing would be to leave, to call for backup. But curiosity and a sense of duty pushed me forward. I pressed the call button, more out of habit than expectation. To my surprise, the elevator dinged, its doors sliding open with a soft whoosh. I stepped inside, my finger hovering over the floor buttons. Where had the sound come from? I tried to recall, to pinpoint its origin. The 10th floor, I decided. That's where I'd start. The ride up was agonizingly slow, each floor ticking by with excruciating deliberation. When the doors finally opened, I half expected to see someone, or something, waiting for me. But the 10th floor was as dark and silent as the lobby had been. I stepped out, my flashlight beam dancing across empty cubicles and closed office doors. Everything looked normal, undisturbed. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe a door slammed somewhere, to my left, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is your last warning. Identify yourself, or I'm calling the police." Another chuckle, closer this time. Then a voice, low and raspy. "Oh, I don't think you'll be calling anyone, friend." I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of a figure at the end of the hall. Tall, unnaturally thin, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Then it was gone, ducking into one of the offices. My mind raced. This wasn't a typical intruder. Something was very, very wrong here. I should leave, I thought. Get out, call for help. But what if this thing got away? What if it hurt someone else? Against my better judgment, I moved down the hallway, my free hand reaching for the pepper spray on my belt. I approached the office where I had seen the figure disappear, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it could be heard throughout the entire floor. For a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The office was dark, seemingly empty. I swept my flashlight around, illuminating a desk, some filing cabinets. The beam caught something reflective. Two somethings. Eyes. I stumbled backward, fumbling with the pepper spray. But before I could raise it, a hand shot out of the darkness, knocking it from my grasp. The flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam spinning crazily around the room. In the strobing light, I caught glimpses of my attacker. Pale skin, stretched tight over an elongated face. A mouthful of teeth that were far too sharp to be human. and those eyes glowing with an inner light that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. I turned to run, but it was faster, impossibly fast. Its hand closed around my arm, its grip like iron. Now, it said, its voice a rasping whisper. Don't you want to play? I struggled, panicking, giving me strength I didn't know I had. I managed to wrench free, bolting out of the office, and down the hallway. Behind me I could hear it laughing, the sound echoing off the walls. I ran for the stairs, not trusting the elevator. As I burst through the stairwell door, I heard it again, closer now. You can run, it called out, but you can't hide. This is my playground now. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. I emerged on another floor, the 15th floor, according to the sign, and ran down the hallway looking for somewhere to hide. Most of the offices were locked, but I finally found one that opened. I ducked inside, closing the door as quietly as I could. In the darkness, I fumbled for a hiding spot, eventually crawling under a large desk. For what felt like hours, I sat there trying to control my breathing, straining my ears for any sound of pursuit. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway outside. They paused outside the office door, and I held my breath, praying it would move on. The doorknob turned. I closed my eyes, as if not seeing the danger could somehow make it go away. I can smell your fear, the voice said. Closer now. It's intoxicating. I opened my eyes to see a pair of legs standing in front of the desk. Slowly, painfully slowly, it crouched down, its face coming into view. In that moment, looking into its inhuman eyes, I understood true terror. This wasn't just an intruder or some psychopath. This was something else, something that shouldn't exist in our world. It smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Found you, it said. What happened next is a blur. I remember screaming, lashing out with all my strength. I remember running again through hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. I remember the thing, always behind me, always just a step away, laughing at my futile attempts to escape. Somehow I made it to the lobby. The front doors were locked. When had they been locked? But in my desperation, I grabbed a chair and smashed through the glass. I ran into the night, not stopping until I collapsed on a busy street corner several blocks away. People gathered around me, concerned faces, asking if I was okay. I couldn't speak, couldn't explain what had happened. The police came.
Then paramedics. They took me to the hospital, treating me for cuts and bruises I didn't even remember getting. I told them my story, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes. They thought I was crazy or on drugs, or both. The next day, detectives came to take my statement. They told me they'd searched the building, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The security cameras showed no intruder, just me running through the halls in a panic, fighting against something that wasn't there. I quit my job that day. I couldn't face going back to that building. Couldn't risk encountering that thing again. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every unexpected sound. Even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of those glowing eyes, that inhuman smile. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear that rasping chuckle, as if it's right outside my window. I don't work night shifts anymore. I avoid tall buildings and empty offices, but no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I can't escape the feeling that someday, somehow, it will find me again. And next time, I might not be so lucky.
awfully lonely out here, and it's not often I have guests." The way he said guests made my blood run cold. I realized with horrifying clarity that I wasn't the first person to stumble upon this cabin, and if I didn't act fast, I wouldn't be the last. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed my bowl and hurled its contents at John's face. He yelled in pain and surprise, momentarily blinded by the hot stew. I took my chance and ran. I burst out of the cabin, my lungs burning as I gulped in the cool morning air. Behind me, I could hear John shouting, his heavy footsteps giving chase. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, crashing through underbrush, leaping over fallen logs. Branches whipped at my face, leaving stinging scratches, but I didn't slow down. I could hear John behind me, getting closer. Just when I thought my legs would give out, I broke through the tree line. There, in the distance, I saw a road. Civilization. Safety. With a final burst of energy, I sprinted towards it. A car appeared on the horizon, and I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help. The car slowed, then stopped. An older couple peered out at me, their faces etched with concern. I didn't wait for them to speak, just yanked open the back door and threw myself inside. "Drive!" I yelled. "Please, just drive!" As we sped away, I dared to look back. There, at the edge of the forest, I saw John. He stood perfectly still, watching the car disappear. Even from a distance, I could see that terrifying smile. I never went hiking alone after that. The police searched the area but found no trace of the cabin or John. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear his growly voice calling out to me from the darkness. And on those nights, I lie awake until dawn, grateful for locked doors and the safety of civilization, knowing that somewhere out there, in the deep, dark woods, JN is still waiting for his next guest. The package sat on my doorstep, innocuous and brown, addressed to someone I'd never heard of, Sarah Mitchell. The name meant nothing to me, but the return address sent a chill down my spine. 1313 Ravens Court, my apartment number, but not my street. I stood there, key in hand, staring at the parcel as if it might suddenly spring to life. I should have left it there, should have called the post office, explained the mix-up. But curiosity, the damned human trait, got the better of me. I picked up the package, unsurprisingly heavy for its size, and brought it inside. My apartment felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed with the introduction of this mysterious box. I set it on the kitchen counter, eyeing it wearily as I went about my evening routine. But my gaze kept drifting back to it, questions swirling in my mind. Who was Sarah Mitchell? Why did the return address match my apartment number? And what was inside? It was past midnight when I finally gave in. Temptation, I told myself. I was just checking for a phone number, some way to contact the real recipient. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The tape gave way easily under my knife. I peeled back the brown paper, revealing a plain cardboard box beneath. My heart was pounding as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Alongside it was a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I opened it. Sarah, the time has come. You know what must be done. R. The cryptic message sent a shiver down my spine. I turned my attention to the wooden box, my fingers tracing the strange symbols. It was locked, a tiny keyhole barely visible among the carvings. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from inside the box. I dropped it like it was on fire, stumbling back from the counter. The scratching continued, growing more insistent. Whatever was inside wanted out. Panic seized me. I grabbed the box, intending to throw it out the window to rid myself of this nightmare. But as my fingers closed around it, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. Images flashed before my eyes. A dark room, candles flickering, hooded figures chanting in a language I didn't recognize. I came to on the floor, the box clutched to my chest. The scratching had stopped, but I could feel a faint pulse, like a tiny heartbeat emanating from within. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, too shaken to speak. A moment later, a message notification pinged. "We know you have it. Open the box, complete the ritual, or suffer the consequences." My blood ran cold. How did they know? Who were they? And what ritual? I spent the next few days in a state of paranoid frenzy. I didn't leave my apartment, didn't answer my phone. The box sat on my coffee table, a constant reminder of the madness that had invaded my life. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear the scratching again, soft and insistent. On the third day, there was a knock at my door. I froze, hardly daring to breathe. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a delivery uniform, holding another package. "Delivery for Sarah Mitchell," he called out. My heart raced. I didn't answer, praying he'd go away. After a few moments, I heard him sigh and set the package down. His footsteps receded down the hallway. I waited an hour before cracking open the door. The package was there, identical to the first. This time I didn't hesitate. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Inside was a key, small, ornate, and undisputably designed for the wooden box. Along with it was another note. "Time is running out. Open the box, speak the words, or we'll come for you." I slammed the door shut, leaning against it as I tried to calm my ragged breathing. This was insanity. I should go to the police and tell them everything, but who would believe me? And what if these people, whoever they were, made good on their threats? That night, I sat on my couch, the box in front of me, the key in my hand. The scratching had started again, more frantic than ever. I could feel the pulse of the box quickening, matching the rapid beat of my own heart. With shaking hands, I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet apartment. I hesitated, my hand on the lid. Did I really want to see what was inside? Did I have a choice? I opened the box. A blinding light erupted from within, filling the room with an otherworldly glow. I shielded my eyes, feeling a rush of wind that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When I lowered my arm, I gasped. Hovering above the open box was a small, pulsating orb of energy. It thrummed with power, sending waves of heat and cold washing over me in alternating bursts. And somehow, impossibly, I could hear it whispering. "Speak the words," it hissed, in a voice that was 1,000 voices. "Complete the ritual. Fulfill your destiny." I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp in my haste to get away. The orb followed, growing larger, its whispers becoming a deafening chorus. "Speak the words, speak the words." But I didn't know the words. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell. This wasn't meant for me. The orb pulsed angrily, tendrils and energy lashing out, scorching the walls and furniture. The temperature in the room skyrocketed, sweat pouring down my face as I cowered in the corner. "You are the chosen," the voices screamed.